The morning sun was barely beginning to brush the marble steps of the federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta when Karoline Leavitt stepped through the double-glass doors, her heels clicking steadily on the polished floor. To the casual observer, she was a poised young woman in her 30s, a former political firebrand who had traded the spotlight of cable news debates for the quiet grind of law. But beneath her calm demeanor, Karoline carried the silent weight of dozens, no, hundreds, of broken people. Families torn apart by injustice. Workers robbed of dignity. Elderly citizens forced from their homes by corporate corruption. And today, her fight was personal. For months, she'd led a class-action lawsuit against Pembroke Holdings, a powerful conglomerate that had manipulated the housing market and illegally seized homes from low-income communities. At the center of it all was Judge Elston Rourke. A man revered in elite circles, feared in legal ones, and deeply embedded in a system that rewarded the rich and punished the vulnerable. He had delayed the $800 million case with endless procedural stalling, rescheduling court dates, burying evidence requests, and using legal gymnastics to block transparency. Karoline had suspected he was compromised, but the truth, when it finally surfaced, shook the very foundation of her beliefs. One late night in her modest office, surrounded by paper-stacked desks and empty coffee cups, her intern stumbled across encrypted files accidentally sent to the wrong inbox. What they revealed was more than corruption, it was conspiracy. Rourke had direct financial ties to Pembroke Holdings. Offshore accounts. Lavish gifts. A villa in Tuscany registered under a shell company. Her heart pounded as she pieced the puzzle together. This wasn't just about a judge with questionable ethics, this was about a system that believed no one would dare challenge it. But Karoline had nothing to lose and everything to stand for. Within days, she filed an emergency appeal to the state's Judicial Review Commission, attaching the damning evidence. She could still recall the moment her trembling hand slid the USB drive across the mahogany table to the chief ethics officer, a silent but resolute declaration that she would not be intimidated. The commission fast-tracked her request. Within 72 hours, an emergency panel ruled the evidence credible enough to reopen the case and expedite proceedings. Rourke's face at the hearing was ghostly pale. His voice, usually booming and domineering, trembled as he attempted to defend his rulings. But the tide had turned. The nation watched with bated breath as networks picked up the story. Headlines flashed across the country. Karoline Leavitt exposes federal judge in $800 million lawsuit scandal. For many, Karoline became a symbol. An embodiment of quiet courage, a reminder that one determined voice could still echo louder than the halls of corruption. And yet, she never sought the fame. While camera crews camped outside the courthouse, she spent her nights comforting the plaintiffs who had nearly lost everything. One of them, an elderly widow named Margaret, clasped Karoline's hand with tears in her eyes and whispered, "Because of you, I'll get my home back." That, more than any news article, made it worth it. Then, without warning, Judge Rourke vanished. 2 days before he was scheduled to testify before a federal grand jury, he failed to show. The FBI raided his home, finding it abandoned, his safe emptied, and his travel records erased. By week's end, it became international news. Judge flees country amid $800 million lawsuit collapse. No one knew where he went. Rumors swirled, France, Dubai, possibly somewhere in South America, but the impact of his flight was seismic. It validated everything Karoline had warned about. But instead of gloating, she stood on the courthouse steps with quiet grace, refusing to dance on the grave of a broken man, even one who had nearly destroyed countless lives. "I don't take joy in his absence," she told the crowd. "I take hope in your presence. That you showed up. That you stood up. That you believed justice could still mean something in this country." Her words resonated, not because they were grand, but because they were true. She wasn't fighting for revenge, she was fighting for restoration. In the months that followed, the Department of Justice took over the case, and Karoline was invited to assist in restructuring legal access for underrepresented communities. With bipartisan support, a national fund was established to help those who had suffered under Pembroke's illegal schemes. Homes were returned. Settlements were paid. And for the first time in years, the scales of justice tilted back toward balance. But perhaps the most surprising moment came when Karoline received a letter, handwritten, worn, and mailed from a remote postmark in southern Argentina. It bore no return address, but the shaky cursive was unmistakable, Elston Rourke. In a quiet corner of her home, she read it, not out of curiosity but out of grace. Karoline, it began, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve your attention. But I need you to know, I watched the trial you led after I left. I saw the faces of those I hurt. And for the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of what I had done. I wanted to be powerful. I became lost. You reminded me what real power looks like, not in control, but in courage. You were the judge this system needed. I pray one day my silence can speak more loudly than my arrogance ever did. She folded the letter gently, tears in her eyes, not because he deserved pity, but because humanity often hides inside broken vessels. She didn't share the letter with the media. She didn't need the world to see it. That moment was for her, and for every person who believed in second chances. Years later, when she spoke to young law students, Karoline didn't talk about the headlines. She talked about Margaret. About the intern who found the evidence. About the janitor at the courthouse who left her notes of encouragement during the darkest hours. Justice, she'd say, isn't a gavel or a robe. It's what happens when ordinary people do the extraordinary thing of caring. And in that, she became more than a lawyer, more than a public figure, she became a storyteller of hope. A guardian of truth. And a reminder that in a world where the powerful often flee from accountability, the brave run toward it. Moral of the story. True justice is not about power or prestige, it's about courage, compassion, and standing up for what is right, even when the odds are stacked against you. One person's integrity can expose corruption, restore faith in humanity, and spark a movement that lifts others. In a world where the powerful may flee responsibility, it is the selfless who stay and rebuild what was broken.